if we ever get to the point where I need to uninstall again and play another one, fucking hell. This is just anti-cheat. This isn't some crazy software where you're hacking people.
Battlefield 6 game will not install if it sees you have Valorant installed.
That is insane. This is another data problem. Low level release a good video about. We'll get into it, but anti-cheating software on games, and there's big problems coming with this.
Again, what was I right about again? I was right about kernel mode anti-cheat. I was perusing x.com, twitter.com by some, and I saw this little tweet here that said, I sure am glad that kernel level anti-cheat has reached the point where they're all starting to conflict with each other. The future of gaming is here. They linked this picture here that is a screenshot of the r/Battlefield subreddit. So if you don't know, Battlefield 6 just dropped their beta. The game looks very good, by the way, a separate topic for a separate video.
You got privacy, now you've got anti-cheating.
And the game is saying with a security violation, the application
not running
to start due to a general software incompatibility. Please uninstall the following conflicting software.
So they're trying to download the Battlefield 6 alpha, beta, whatever the fuck you want to call it, and they've got Valorant installed on their computer, and they're not being allowed to install this unless they uninstall Valorant because of software incompatibility, and you'll find out why. But the fact you have to uninstall a game to install another game, I've never heard of. Didn't even think that was a thing. So let's get into it. That's the quick summary.
Yes, that Valorant.
It's a bit complicated.
Battlefield 6 game will not install if it sees you have Valorant installed.
That is insane.
And why would Valorant be incompatible with Battlefield 6? They're separate games. They shouldn't conflict with each other at all. Unless you
shouldn't.
Riot Vanguard. Riot Vanguard is this program written by Riot Games. It is a kernel-level anti-cheat that shipped with Valorant since release in 2020.
Anti-cheat.
It started shipping with
League of Legends in 2024.
It is what is known as a kernel-level anti-cheat. If you're not
What's
aware
that mean?
Of what a kernel-level anti-cheat
Tell us.
Basically, your computer operates in two separate modes of execution. Right? You have the kernel, which is a very privileged mode of execution. Think of the Windows OS runs here, and then in the user mode level, you have programs like maybe it's League of Legends,
just your normal programs,
or maybe you have things like RuneScape.exe, right? And typically, what cheaters
Shout out to
do is they will
RuneScape.
install programs on their computer that are hacks, right? And these hacks, because they run at the same privilege level as the other program, they can just read the memory out of this program, or in some cases,
I never knew that.
Of that program to reveal
that is
things
actually
that
crazy.
could not visually otherwise see. Maybe inside the Battlefield 6 memory, they can read this sequence of digits, right? I'm making shit up, but it may be the case that at a certain location, a certain number, like this hex 02, for example, indicates a unit at a particular location, and that location may be behind a wall, maybe behind a bunker, maybe someplace you visually cannot see. Because hack.exe can just read that memory willy-nilly, you can show that to the user in a different screen and reveal to them, hey, there's an enemy over there, go check there, giving them a privileged advantage that other people may not have. That's a hack. And then enter the world of kernel-level anti-cheats. The games industry, unfortunately, has entered this really terrible trend where now every game publisher has effectively their own flagship anti-cheat software. Riot has Vanguard, EA has, I think, Easy Anti-Cheat, and Epic has
just be
else
all
like
the
that.
same.
Every publisher has their own
program
that runs at the kernel level, the privilege level, to look for these hack processes, right? So what this .sys file is doing is because it runs at the kernel level, it is privileged, and it has access to the rest of the software on the computer. And it's going to look for known signatures of things like hack.exe. If it sees hack.exe or like the MD5 sum, the check sum of that image running, it will flag that user for being a cheater. And while this may all seem well and good kind of at face value, this raises a lot of kind of like obvious security concerns for two reasons.
Heaps.
One, because you are
heaps of
giving
security
the publisher
concerns.
Privileged access to your computer by default every time you want to play one of their games. What if, for example...
Now, this is just anti-cheat. This isn't some crazy software where you're hacking people. This is just anti-cheat that can go to all your programming.
That are running like hack.exe.
What if the publisher sees that I'm watching
not porn.exe,
right?
And via some telemetry or something else, it picks that up and ships it back to EA headquarters or Riot headquarters.
Now they know.
That's a violation of my privacy. I don't really like it. Also, there's a technical, more vulnerability side of the house that I'll explain.
Now the problem is,
example. There have been ransomware groups of people that are using malware to hold computers
always
hostage
going to be
that
one of these
anti-cheat
people.
vulnerabilities to bypass antivirus. Genshin Impact, for example,
it's always going to be a problem.
At one point, via a simple ioctl, basically
hackers and all that shit are always going to be ahead of anti-cheat. It's just like steroids, you know, and checking for steroids. Bodybuilders and all that, and science will always be ahead of the game. And the science of checking these steroids and everything is always going to be lacking. It is always the way. That's why people can be undetectable for so long. It's always lagging behind. And it's going to be the same for this. Hackers will always be in front.
Because the anti-cheat runs in a privileged state. So the ransomware group was going in, they would get onto a computer, they would see that you have Jensen Impact installed, and they could use that to disable your anti-cheat locally, which is absolutely insane. So
that
by
is
installing
insane.
these programs
That is crazy.
You're kind of, one, potentially having a privacy issue.
I never knew
but
it could
you're
do that.
exposing your computer to a new threat landscape.
I don't play these games, though.
The vulnerabilities of the publisher ships without knowing, or maybe intentionally, who knows. But why does EA care if the Valorant anti-cheat is running on your computer? Why does it matter if there's one anti-cheat and another anti-cheat?
Because they're conflicting.
Well, in a perfect world, the anti-cheat system is only running
Should
when the
be
game is
at
running. So instead of watching notporn.exe, it should make
this
sense
is the
that
main
anti-cheat
problem I
.sys,
have
the
with this.
anti-cheat for Battlefield,
Well, I
only
want to
runs
talk
when
about
Battlefield
it.
is running. And that is the case for almost all of the anti-cheats that exist on the market. Except for which one? Which one?
There's
You may have
always
guessed. Yep, drum roll,
something
please.
that
It
runs.
is Riot's Vanguard. Riot
Right,
anti-cheat
yeah.
is a kernel mode anti-cheat that loads
it's
as
always
a root
on.
driver. What that means is it is on when your computer turns off. Anti-cheat does not stop running until your computer turns off.
That is
It
insane.
one of the most invasive anti-cheats that has ever been seen.
Why is there so many data and privacy problems? How can you have an anti-cheat always on, even if you're not playing the game? These are able to access your files.
We get very technical here, but if you're not technical, it's fine. I'll explain.
What is going on?
The anti-cheat is so invasive that what it does is it
Look
is
at
what is
this.
called a hook for a syscall of the operating system. If you're not sure what that means, basically,
This is when your
what is
computer's
happening here
always
is the
on.
Vanguard anti-cheat is impersonating the operating system for all of these syscalls. So whenever you are running the anti-cheat, Vanguard is live. You are calling allocate memory, free memory, suspend thread, suspend
That
process.
is
Instead of your OS, like Windows, actually being the one that's doing this action, Vanguard is inserting itself in the middle and taking that action.
That is insane.
Also, Vanguard has this crazy
This
way
is a great
of
video.
swapping out. It's called Control Register 3. Not really important, but basically, if you try
Yeah.
to do the thing where you look at the memory of Vanguard running, for example, or Valorant running, if you try to inspect that memory,
Yeah, you can't.
it will swap out the memory page live
How
at runtime, so you get
insane.
a different page
Why?
that is actually there. It is hands
Why?
down the most.
That's what I
invasive
wanna know,
anti-cheat
the
on the
why.
market. If any of this hacking stuff interests you, by the way, go check out Stacks.
The why
This, in my opinion,
this
is
needed.
why the EA anti-cheat refuses to run if it sees Valorant installed. I think they are genuinely concerned about certain tactics
Yeah,
or certain
getting
ways
into
that
the game.
EA anti-cheat does
Oop.
inspection of user mode processes,
yeah.
conflicting with the other ways that Valorant does a syscall
They're
hooking
two different
and memory.
companies.
We are
You don't want to see
entering
another
this
company seeing your
really
code.
weird landscape where every publisher, effectively, so Riot, EA,
This is
Epic, etc.,
dangerous.
has
Very,
their
very
own
dangerous.
kernel-level anti-cheat. And they are all using different hook points, different tactics, different like ways of hooking.
I
the
mean, how many
kernel
games do
that
we
are
all play
all
these
unique and
days?
have
You can
different
have
side
10
effects
different
on
fucking
operating
anti-cheats on your
what
bloody
this boils
game
down to
on
is that
installed.
we are coming to a place where certain games are not compatible with other games.
That
And
is a
what this
big
means is that
problem.
like you can't have Battlefield 6 installed if you have
That
Valorant
is-
installed because they are concerned that the kernel.
I never
anti-cheats
thought it would
will,
get to this
touch each
point.
other and potentially crash your system.
Never
Inside the kernel,
thought
right? Like the Windows
this would
kernel that
happen.
runs the operating system. We have
Am I
this weird,
surprised?
Like, land
No.
war. Like literally, there is like a war going on for territory about like what hook points different publishers own. Like, oh, this region of the hook is owned by Riot, and like, oh, EA's anti-cheat uses this over here. Oh, but Epic uses.
There's a lot that comes out these days with what companies try to do and where they're going with things and what people are finding out. This is genuinely scary. This is actually insane, you know. To come to a stage where you have to uninstall other games to play a game that you want just because of anti-cheat. Where are we headed?
This part, and if
Where
any
we
of these
headed?
touch each other incorrectly, it'll blow up your computer. We're entering almost a phase where like you need to have a separate computer for every
fuck that.
different game publisher
That's
that is
fucking-
different from the computer
that is
that you
just
use for your
insane.
personal stuff. Because again, the kernel is this privileged
It's
level of
go-
memory
this is getting
that you,
crazy.
like, once a driver gets installed, you can never really
It's
be
just
sure if
getting
it's gonna be
crazy.
safe again. So it's like, you know, is EA gonna report things?
Definitely
that are on the
check this
computer back to
video
their
out.
servers? I don't know, just to be safe. separate computer to game on. It's a terrible consumer experience.
I'll put all the links should be in the description.
Now it's kind of like a light at
Low
the end of the
level
tunnel moment. Microsoft is moving antivirus providers, and also like there's a separate article on
this is good though.
AntiCheat out of the Windows kernel. Microsoft
Good,
is ready
good.
to test Windows changes to
It
prevent
needs
another
to.
CrowdStrike incident. So if you don't remember what CrowdStrike, the CrowdStrike incident was an event in July of 24 where basically all around the world this company
12
called CrowdStrike
hours.
had this EDR, this endpoint detection and response system called Falcon, right? Falcon was a system that basically was a security as a service platform where instead of you having your own dedicated SOC security operations center to like see hacks happening, CrowdStrike would do it for you, right? And CrowdStrike, again, to have this kind of privileged level of access to the computer would run at the kernel level. And so when a vulnerability got triggered,
It fucked it up.
Falcon EDR,
Fucks it all
literally
up.
crashed computers all over the world, taking the entire global economy generally offline for like 12 hours.
That is
I am
insane.
very
12
concerned
hours.
that the movement of code from user mode to kernel mode, just for
Which is what
gamers,
Windows is gonna be
push
doing.
more of that attack surface for gamers into the kernel and expose everybody to a privacy and security concern that they're not
We
even
don't know.
aware of. So,
These
again,
companies
Microsoft's
probably don't
trying to
even
get rid of
know.
this, trying to figure out ways to create APIs effectively to move
This is gonna
code
fucking
out
YOLO,
of
and
the kernel
hopefully
so
it
that
works.
Antivirus and other security products can do it without having to run kernel mode code. How that works, I really couldn't tell you. I'm not an engineer at Microsoft. I don't know. But yeah, so
They
anyway,
won't
guys,
know,
that's it for
trust
now.
me.
Thanks for watching. I appreciate
Anyway.
it. If you like this video, hit that sub button.
Very
and
concerning. Very, very concerning. Hopefully they... something has to happen. Hopefully they change it. Hopefully Battlefield 6 or obviously the problems is Vanguard. That needs to change. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I don't play those games. But the point, if we ever get to the point where I need to uninstall again and play another one, fucking hell. Hopefully they make that change successful.